And I see it as a tremendous barrier to everything meaningful within the family. And you know who pays the biggest price tag for it? Little children. Primarily because values are not taught to children. Values are caught by children. So you just don't put your children down in a chair and you say, Johnny, this I believe and this you will believe also, and this is the nature of the universe, and these are the things I believe about God, and here's my theology, and this is what I want of you, and this is right and wrong. You really don't do that very often. You can't get away with that except under exceptional circumstances. How then do you teach your values to your children? You teach them incidentally, little by little, moment by moment, by hearing you talk, by being with you, by hearing you talk on the phone. They pick it up very, very subtly. We saw this illustrated in our own home a while back when our daughter was 10 and Ryan was 5. At that time, and it's no longer true, I might tell you, at that time, our little girl was in the process of building her conscience, stone upon stone, precept upon precept. She wanted to know, what do you believe, Daddy? What's right and what's wrong? What does God want? What's sin? What does He want of me? What is right? What is black? What's white? She was asking those kind of questions. If you have a 10-year-old, they're probably in that same process. Immediately prior to puberty, there is the final process of building the conscience, and it is a very important time in the spiritual life of a child. Now, once they get into adolescence, they're listening to their own peer group much more, and our daughter is starting to move into that a little more. But at that time, she was really listening, and it's a scary time because you realize the importance of it. And if we were sitting watching television together and God's name was used in vain, as it is on almost every program today, and folks, I don't know how you feel about that, but that bothers me. That bothers me a great deal. That bothers me more than the sex and violence on television, because God is very holy to me. And the Bible says God is not mocked. And one of the 10 commandments is, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. This is an absolute in the Bible. And to take His name and use it in casual conversation, to use it to punctuate a sentence, to use it in humor, that really bothers me, especially when it comes into my own home. And our daughter knows that. So if we were sitting watching television and God's name was used in vain, I didn't have to turn and look at Danae. I could see her out of the corner of my eye turn and look at me. And see what she was saying when she did that. She was saying, say it again, Daddy. I've heard it before, but I need to hear you say it again. You don't approve of that, do you? You don't like that coming into our home. Affirm for me that's against your standards and what you believe. And what she really expects me to do is to get up and turn that set off or change a channel. Because in so doing, you see, I am saying to her, this is something I believe. Well, that process was taking place. And we were riding in the car about a mile from our house. And at that time, there was an X-rated movie there, which has since been torn down, and I'm glad that it has. But we were driving past this thing. Ryan was in the back seat at 5 years of age, and Danae's in the front seat, and we're driving along, and we passed this movie. I think the name of it was Flesh Gordon or something like that. And when we drove past this movie, Danae looked over at it, and in characteristic fashion, she said, that's a dirty movie, isn't it, Daddy? I said, yes, Danae, I think it is. She said, is that what they call an X-rated movie? And I said, yes, Danae, I suppose that's an X-rated movie. She thought for a minute or two, and she said, boy, dirty movies are really evil, aren't they? And I said, yes, Danae, they are very evil. Now, the whole conversation took about a block in the car. She asked me 3 one-sentence questions, and I gave her 3 short one-sentence answers. That's all there was to it. Ryan's in the back seat, and he did not enter into the conversation. And I wondered what he thought about it, because he didn't say anything, and I just finally figured, well, the kid didn't hear it. But he heard it. And he not only heard it, but he thought about it. But the funny thing is, folks, Ryan would have no idea in the world what goes on in a dirty movie. I mean, how's a 5-year-old going to know that? Nobody ever sat down and said this is what a dirty movie is, but he had his own ideas about it. And I found out what those ideas were 4 nights later, having said nothing about that conversation in between. We got out at bedtime to pray our bedtime prayer. And little Ryan prayed first, and he folded his little hands and spontaneously returned to that conversation 4 days earlier. And he said, "Dear Lord, help me not go see any dirty movies." Then he revealed what he thought a dirty movie was. He says, "Where everybody is spitting on one another." For Ryan, the dirtiest thing he can think of would be where everybody get together and spit on one another. But you know, I learned something that day. I learned something about how subtly values are transmitted. See, I did not know that I was going to teach Ryan one more little element of what I believed on that day. How did it happen? I didn't plan it. It happened because we were together, and he was listening to me and hearing what I had to say. And that's the way you convey it. And you lose that opportunity when you're never home, when you're exhausted when you're there, when you're carrying a briefcase full of work, when you're irritable because you're so fatigued. And I see this as a tremendous tool, a tremendous barrier to everything that we care about. You know, I'm not the only one to have a concern at that point. You do not even have to have a Christian perspective to have those same views. And in fact, there was a song that was popular a few years ago. You can still hear it almost every day on certain stations. I think it's one of the most creative of all popular songs I've ever heard because it goes to the heart of the American way of life. And I have the words here before me. I'm not going to sing it to you, or we'd just clear the auditorium out. The name of the song is Cats in the Cradle. It's written by a fellow named Harry Chapin. I do not know Harry Chapin, but I know that he knows what I'm talking about today because he could not have written the words of this song if he didn't know something about it. He said, "My child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away, and he was talking before I knew it. And as he grew, he'd say, 'I'm going to be like you, Dad. You know I'm going to be like you.' And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, the little boy blue and the man in the moon. 'When you coming home, Dad?' 'Well, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, son. You know we'll have a good time then.' Well, my son turned 10 just the other day. He said, 'Thanks for the ball, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw?' I said, 'Not today. I got a lot to do.' He said, 'That's okay.' And he walked away, but his smile never dimmed. It said, 'I'm going to be like him. Yeah. You know I'm going to be like him.' And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, the little boy blue and the man in the moon. 'When you coming home, Dad?' 'Well, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, son. You know we'll have a good time then.' Well, he came home from college just the other day, so much like a man that had just had to say, 'Son, I'm proud of you. Can you sit for a while?' He shook his head and he said with a smile, 'What I'd really like, Dad, is to borrow the keys. See you later. Can I have them, please?' 'When you coming home, son?' 'I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. You know we'll have a good time then.' Well, I've long since retired and my son's moved away, and I called him up just the other day. I said, 'I'd sure like to see you if you don't mind.' He said, 'I'd love to, Dad, if I can find the time. But you see, my new job's a hassle, and the kids have the flu. But it's sure been nice talking to you, Dad. It's been nice talking to you.' And as I hung up the phone, it occurred to me he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, the little boy blue and the man in the moon. 'When you coming home, son?' 'Well, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. You know we'll have a good time then.' I don't know if that cracks you between the eyes like it does me, but there's a message in that song for us.